You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
All right, hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This month, we are talking about death, cemetery tourism, and romanticized morbidity. We are reviewing the new album from Die Selektion, and we are going to cover a gambit of topics relating to identity, club culture, goth YouTube, fashion, and music from the perspective of those who came to goth culture in the modern age. As always, I am the Count, and within dick-grabbing range is my co-host, Mark.
Yes. We are actually physically in the same room this time around and not several states apart, so this is a very special episode indeed.
You're good. I can boost that in post. And also within dick-grabbing range is a special in-studio guest, Lilith.
It's okay.
From the Goth Kit. No, it's not Gothcast anymore. Bitchcraft.
Yeah, it's Bitchcraft. Okay, so, well, I'm visiting from California. I used to do gothropology, and then I changed it to Bitchcraft, and I'm on a semi-hiatus, but am also legally changing my name. So if I sound like an imposter, I'm totally not. It's Lilith Asphodel at this point. Soon to be legally. Not quite yet, but yeah, I go by that.
So we also have two more guests coming onto the show for the second half of the episode. But Lilith, since it's been a long time since you were on, why don't you tell us a little about what kind of drew you to goth, how long you've been in the scene, and a little about yourself, where we can find you and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, what drew me to goth is I was at the LA Opera when I was 6 years old, and I saw, and I was also very formal, by the way. I forced my dad to wear a tuxedo in the daytime, and I was in a full gown, obviously, as one does, and there was a lady there in platform boots in a full-length gown, and I was like, what the fuck is she doing? That's not allowed. But that's fucking cool. I like it. And I don't know, just started reading Edgar Allan Poe like everyone else, and kind of found out. Okay, like also, I watched Helena by My Chemical Romance when I was 12, and people can say what the fuck they want to about their music, but that music video was very, very gothic. And yeah, and then I realized that there was actual goth music.
Aesthetically, it was a draw.
Yeah. So for a fucking 12-year-old, I think that's okay, and I still love them. But yeah, and then I tried to find actual goth bands, and I was very happy. So it sort of just turned from being 12 and then liking punk and then liking goth, and I've always liked the literature and everything. So yeah, I guess in terms of style, I used to like just kind of do my own half thrifted punk thing, and I would walk around with like this tiny micro mini with the Sex Pistols on it, and like Sid Vicious was like right on my crotch. Accidentally gave that away to someone, huge mistake. But it just turned into like more corsets and less tearing shit up. I still like to, you know, put holes in my shirts and whatnot, but that's obvious. So where can you find me? I am on Instagram a lot. It's still gothropology on Instagram. Daniel is not, so he's shaking his head because he's an old man.
Instagram is
and
listen, back in my day.
In my fucking day, yeah.
You had to mail pictures to other people of your food. You had to print it.
In my day, we had facethejury.com.
You had to make your own red room and print your own photos. And
I don't think you know what a red room is.
I mean, red room.
Not the way that you... That does not mean what you think it means.
What's the name of the room you develop photos in?
It's
red.
It's a dark room.
Use red lights.
That's a dark room.
Yeah. What's a red room?
No.
That's a movie. A horror movie. I don't know what it is.
A red room is where you watch people be tortured.
I'm going to show you what a red room is.
That's basically what the movie is. Okay, all right.
It's my exact fetish.
Okay.
But not exactly, because we usually have to pay to watch that, and that's not my fetish, is paying money. So anyway.
I don't know if that's anybody's fetish.
Actually it is.
It's probably, yeah.
Yeah, I could talk about that. It's financial domination. It's a real thing. Where basically it's a service where the person controls how you spend your money and manages your finances in basically a sexual
marriage.
way. Yeah. So anyway, I think that was most of the questions aside from where you can find me. Moving, still going to be in California though, so I'm leaving tomorrow night. But yeah, I don't really know what I want to be focusing on in terms of my exact media stuff quite yet. I'm not going to be at kpcradio.com. In the future, I'm going to be transferring schools, so I will be doing the DIY at home mic thing and hopefully finding some cool people in the future. I keep having ideas and no one to talk to, so I need to get my ass back in there. So yeah, Instagram,
so
Facebook.
So this is like consensual torture, right? Not like
no. Red rooms are entirely like non-consensual.
Okay,
that's the whole point.
So like snuff films.
Yes, basically.
Okay,
snuff.
Jesus Christ, get out of my house.
No, too late.
If I don't make it through the night, you know why.
I'm kidding. This is why I have fetishes that will never happen in real life. It's unfortunate.
Wasn't that one of the shorts on the Cradle of Filth film? Was about,
I feel like that.
I think the
Cradle of Fear, that movie.
Cradle of Fear, yeah, where he was paying online to have people tortured, and then the twist was they were like, "Oh, you can come do it yourself," and then he ended up in the video,
yeah, that had the guy who played the Master from Doctor Who.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, don't meet strangers online. Well, on that note, we're going to go ahead and jump into the news.
If this boy did this, and the gothic, stuff that went around it and the motive and everything, don't we all sort of want to know, that could be our teenager, that could be our kid doing that. How could that possibly happen?
Being described as being involved with the goth movement, but what exactly is that? We kind of know it when we see it, but some aspects of a goth lifestyle could they provoke such a murder?
All right, so our news article this month is titled, Why Trips to the Cemetery Aren't Just for Big Fat Goths. This article starts by saying, I'm talking about tomb tourism. Many fellow taphophiles, which is a lover of gravestones and cemeteries. Taphophiles, that's, there's a sex joke in there somewhere. I can't think of one.
Did I mention I'm drinking tonight? So
yeah, okay, well, don't put it in my butt till we're done.
Oh, no problem.
Well, but you have to, how is he going to finish then if you're already done?
That's okay. That's fair. That's fair. This is all getting cut out.
No, it's not. No, do not cut this out.
No, I can only imagine someone listening to this for the first time. This is, hey, an episode about baby bats. We can learn about New Goth's perspective on, and it's just us talking about fetishes.
And Mark's malformed taint.
Mark's butt flaps.
My small mini tail.
Jesus. You guys are never coming over again.
Well.
Many fellow taphophiles and I regularly take time out of our weekends to wander among the dearly departed, this is a really bad transition, taking in the sights and sounds of the graveyard. Why? Because it's about as fascinating and enlightening as any hobby could be. So I guess we can kind of talk about this at the start here, and it's I get a lot of varying opinions on this, but what's your take on cemeteries as a place, as a sacred place, as a place to go to, and how that relates to your involvement or your identity within goth culture? Is there any kind of relation there, or is it...
I actually have thought about this quite a bit because I'm a fan of, so in obviously Hollywood, at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, they like to show movies there across summer.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've already seen it, but I went to go see The Conjuring there, which was a good time. But then when I was sitting there, I was like, is this respectful? But then again, it is specifically a cemetery for actors, so you can deal with that in its own context. But also,
Roz Williams buried there, isn't he?
Well, it's specifically like not just actors, but I guess directors, anyone who's like entertaining.
Okay.
But I have
so definitely not anyone on this podcast.
No, we can like visit there
in our own way.
I'm very entertaining on occasion, but I have very mixed feelings. And also, just to be really specific, whenever people talk about fucking at cemeteries, I get it. I get the idea and the concept and the desire to, but I would personally never ever do it.
I mean,
I think it's
they're
fucked
not
up.
Murdering anyone against their will, right?
Well, that's like a different story. Don't kink shame me. But it almost contrasts sometimes, because on the one hand, I really enjoy. I definitely think that being a goth, that's the whole point, is the architecture is really beautiful, and just walking around and enjoying mortality in its own way. That's, I think, a human rite of passage, and something that a lot of people might not get to enjoy because they're too freaked out. But just also as a pagany, witchy, heretic, heathen person, be respectful. It's my only thing. Like, don't go fucking around with the graves and whatnot. I think that's fucked up. And just personally, I know one of my ancestors would kick my ass. So, but that aside, no, definitely.
There's 2 of them in here.
There are 2 flies fucking.
They're sexually attracted.
My fly swatter.
Yeah.
The question of respect is actually an interesting one, because I find that I don't know. Well, of course, it's not only goths that grew up in the 90s, but I think the goths who came from the 90s, or the younger goths who have a obsession or nostalgia with the 90s, tend to view cemeteries as a place just for kind of being edgy or for goth expression.
Right.
And I think what kind of comes out of that is a bit of disrespect. Like, for example, I don't get on board with people taking photos when they are on top of tombstones or that kind of thing. Especially, I've seen some where they're like ones that have like either crosses with the arms or something, where they're balancing on something that could break or something like that.
Yeah.
Not just for the dead person, but someone spent a lot of money on that, and you don't have their permission to just put your ass on it, and so you kind of got to think like, well, what if this was my sister who died in a car accident or something, and you're kind of masturbating on her grave or touching yourself or whatever, because I've seen that kind of thing too. So I think that's,
well, I mean, for me, it's not even so much about goth expression. Like, when I think it's more about human expression.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When I go into a cemetery, it helps to put things in perspective. Like, death is something that's been repressed in the culture. It's not something we think about very often. And yeah, I think I need to be put into that perspective from time to time, because it makes you appreciate your life more.
Yeah.
And I think it's healthy to at least be respectful toward the fact that we are all going to die one day. And having recently lost my grandmother, it's definitely, it's a reality that if you just ignore and repress and put off, it's going to hit you really hard when it does happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that does happen within goth culture too, because people romanticize it, or especially younger goths, it's just part of not understanding what death is unless you've experienced it when you're young. And I think for me, there's kind of the 2 elements. I do certainly appreciate cemeteries as an aesthetic and as a art kind of thing, because there's a lot of art in cemeteries, and also just kind of the stereotypical spooky, haunted kind of go at night during October and kind of thing. I appreciate that, but it's also for me becoming more and more of a place to go and to meditate, and to, like you were saying, think about life and think about what it means, where you're going, why you're here. Think about the people who have come before you, and how we all share this common bond, and what that means in a practical sense, and in kind of more of a transcendent sense as a human race, across borders and across cultures and that kind of thing. And I think that's really important, but I think it's also a good analog for goth. And I know I said this before on the interview we did on the big seance,
right?
But I think the cemetery, because it encapsulates so many of those elements: morbidity, art, contemplation, philosophy, history, this kind of amalgam of all these things coming together, and this base connective tissue. I think it's really a good analogy for goth culture just in general, and that's why it's really kind of meaningful to me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So she goes on to say, a couple weeks ago, Guardian columnist Barbara Ellen caused a bit of a stir by calling the pastime of tomb tourism an activity for big fat goths. The short opinion piece is a joke, I hope. I don't suppose Miss Ellen is really dismissing all taphophiles as morbid and morbidly obese, but the punchline fell rather flat with those commenting on the Guardian's website. And I guess this kind of brings up another relevant point in that this notion of, and we touched on this a bit, but the notion of morbidity. I've heard some people argue for a morbid element being essential for a goth lifestyle or for a goth aesthetic. And I guess the question is, how do we fit that in without romanticizing it to a point where it is just kind of a fantasy where you're thinking about zombies and vampires and that kind of thing, and we're extracting, kind of doing what mainstream culture does and extracting the reality of death and mourning and grief from kind of a way to protect ourselves from thinking about those things.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's exactly what it is, and that's every time, like, our obsession with, and you notice, like, you know, The Walking Dead, if it was only, or, you know, any show about vampires or werewolves or anything like that, if it was only goth interest, they wouldn't be on the air. So a lot of people obviously have a preoccupation with, I think, their own fear of death, and that's honestly, I think, why people write and fixate so much on zombies, is because we're really fixated on, you know, what happens and not dying and, you know, everything like that. So I think everyone has their own relationship to that and their own understanding of their place in it. And I think how they act reflects their maturity level, just to be really simple about it. And, you know, I think, like you were saying a bit off mic about how, you know, people who go there just to be edgy and honestly just be douchebags, like, how do we not do that is maybe to not be 12 years old. And I don't mean like literally, I mean, I'm partially
Mentally,
literally.
Don't be 12.
Pretty much. So just, if you're doing something for passive reaction, then I think that just reflects you're very, very fucking uncomfortable.
It's, yeah, I think it can also just simply be an ignorance of something. And I think in that case, what matters to me is how someone handles getting new information or different perspectives on something, because a lot of times our reactions are to reflexively defend our positions and defend our actions. But I think the mark of someone who is mature but simply just ignorant of how their actions may affect someone else is actually thoughtfully taking criticism or information from another source and considering that they may have been wrong in the first place. I've experienced that actually recently when someone said that basically said suicide was selfish, and if someone kills themselves they deserve to die and whatever.
Yeah, fuck that.
So that was an interesting conversation.
So just to reiterate, if you say that to my face, that basically means you are asking me to punch you in the nose. And I'll just say you had it coming.
Yeah.
You asked for it. Come on. Plus, as Daniel mentioned, and why he wants to kick me out of his house now, I have a murder fetish. So, like, please give me a reason. I'm looking for one. I just need a small reason. Sorry.
Just the slightest, you know, even the most minute.
That's the thing. That negates the consent problem. Does their consent matter if they're a fucking asshole? Like, I don't think so.
Yes, it matters. It is
the opinion of this podcast that yes, it matters.
There's a degree to which punishment is appropriate based on this is a morality issue, but that's part of the problem I have with hell. The concept of hell is even if you take, we're getting way off topic, even if you take the worst case scenario with someone like Hitler, or someone like Dahmer or whatever, to say that person deserves an eternity of conscious torment is a degree beyond any
That's
temporal,
a new level of sadism.
any temporal act. An eternity of conscious torment is, so anyway, that's a whole different conversation.
I think that's also, again, like that whole people's fear of, that's again a really insecure thing. Whenever I hear people who are like, oh, you're going to burn in hell for that. Well, why are you, okay, who hurt you is my first question, and why? Just saying, also recently I shifted majors from journalism to psychology, so I'm going to, if you're good at something, never do it for free. So I decided to not do it for free anymore. And so I'll stop talking about my murder fetish before someone who might hire me hears that and it was like, never mind, we're not going to hire her as a therapist. That'll be fucked up.
So all right, so let's move on. Here's these are a couple excerpts of comments from the original article being referenced. They said, how about calling them historians, social investigators, and academics, even people just interested in the past? I read Barbara's short opinion piece on taphophiles and didn't find it at all affectionate, said the graveyard detective. I wander through cemeteries and churchyards reading the inscriptions and touching epitaphs and collecting stories of tragedy, heroism, and dedication. I also photograph the wonderful sculptures and grave art and liken the experience to visiting an open-air art gallery and museum. And I think that's really kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, on my perspective of cemeteries. It's really a intersection of a lot of different elements of humanity and human creativity.
And you got to see, honestly, that's part of what I enjoy so much is when you get a cemetery with that is either period specific or encompasses a lot of different time frames, you get to see what the personal preference was for style at the time. You get to see what they valued. Was it really big and rococo? Was it really minimalist? Like what, I think that offers some really cool insight as to just us at different time frames. Like, what do we want to represent us forever? Which is always my problem with deciding what I want done with my remains. I'm like, Viking funeral would be cool, but that's very temporary.
Yeah.
Plus, there's also, the funeral industry, which always throws a kink into everything.
I have so many opinions on that. That's another podcast.
Yeah. Check out Caitlin Doherty's Order of the Good Death.
Yes.
For more on that. So they say, we get so uptight about such a short opinion. Oh, why get so uptight about such a short opinion piece, you may ask? I suppose it's because taphophiles are a bit weary of being painted as goths and weirdos. Not that there's anything wrong with liking black lipstick, but I don't know why every fucking mainstream article says goths, they're into black lipstick. That's like the one defining factor of goths. I don't
think I've worn black lipstick in a good 10 years.
Yeah. But there's so much more to tomb tourism than indulging a taste for the macabre. Cemeteries are places of beauty which can be appreciated by everyone. Many graveyards have become a paradise for wildlife, small green oases in the midst of gray concrete cities or expanses of woodland on the outskirts of towns.
Oases. Grammar, fucking incompetent bitch. You're rude and your grammar sucks. Fuck
Get
you.
Out. Don't leave. Get off my podcast. So the kind of... I can't even think that. I'm second guessing everything
Don't
I'm saying
fuck
now.
up your grammar.
The kind of fallacious straw man of what goths are about aside, I do think that's important. And I guess for me, every time I take my son to the cemetery, at least I kind of like to look at the flowers and one time there was a baby owl that was walking around. And it was fucking adorable.
We have peacocks at ours.
Peacocks?
We have peacocks and random cats.
Aww.
Sometimes coyotes.
Sometimes there's deer.
Awesome. Deers are
ours.
cool.
Not coyotes, though.
beer
That sounds
cans.
scary. Oh, that's
They're
the local
just-
fauna.
Yes.
Those aren't like sentient, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's something cool happening at your
As
cemetery.
disgusting
I
and
don't know
polluted as
about.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were sentient.
This is in reference to the what you said about not everyone is just indulging their taste for the macabre. I think this is a decent illustration of how goth culture is the sum of its parts. I've mentioned several times on the show the notion of the homology hypothesis, which is essentially goth being the structural resonance of many elements. But essentially that if you pull out any one element and say goth is just the music, goth is just a fashion, goth is just about death obsession, it no longer is goth, because you have non-goths that love post-punk or punks that love death rock. You have people dressing in an ostensibly goth aesthetic that reject the label or identify with some other youth subculture. You have taphophiles and other cultures that have a deep fascination with death. And so when talking about a goth culture internalized as a personal identity and performed as a lifestyle, any kind of reductionist approach like goths are those people in black lipstick or goths just care about death will fail to explain what goth is.
Well, that's the difference, and that's what she I think that reflects her own understanding of most labels, identities, whatever you want to call it, because I think a lot of I don't want to sound like an asshole and say trends, but a lot of things that people self-identify with right now are very aesthetically oriented. So I think most people expect other things like that to also be only visual. So they're like, oh yeah, black lipstick, because you know, whatever they're doing is completely summed up by what they look like. So that's, I think, a reflection of their own shallowness, maybe, and just their kind of, you know, failure of understanding.
Plus, the black lipstick is the first big attention getter for the outsider.
Sure.
They pay attention to the appearance first and foremost. So I think they kind of gravitate toward that first and foremost because that they believe that's what it's all about.
Because, like, how many, you know, identities or movements right now are really based on, like, old poetry and film and history? Like, a complete, it's basically, goth is very, like, a Renaissance man in its own, because it's, like, every aspect that makes, you know, media or culture, we kind of have an affinity for something, and that's part of what makes it. So I don't know if anything else that's still happening can say that. Maybe there is, and I'm just being a bitch, but...
It's kind of cognitive laziness too, because goth aesthetic, goth appearance can be used as a way to reflect the gender expectations of someone back onto them and kind of try to force them to question why they have a visceral reaction to someone else's appearance, and kind of just using a label or a visual trigger to write something off is a way of getting around that. And I think that's kind of it's kind of a default mode for most humans, but I would hope that people try to circumvent that and think about why they have certain reactions to certain things.
That's asking way too much of most people.
So they go on to say, what a shame for the tranquility and peace of the graveyard to be ignored just because death has become a taboo in the modern age. Sure, we're happy to kick back and watch a violent action film filled with death or blast people to smithereens in video games. Those are normal hobbies, but take an interest in the final resting places of people just like you and me, people who lived, loved, and died, and suddenly it's considered a bit creepy. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think they pretty much hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of hypocrisy in that, you know, despite the fact that death is repressed in the culture, we still kind of, I guess, fetishize violence and death in a certain way in the media. We just like to separate it that way.
I think also in a lot of action film, and I always find it really interesting when the people that are into like gore porn and just very like heavy, like torture heavy shit, they self-identify as quote unquote more normal and not as any type of subculture. And I think it's interesting, and I always want to read into that type of person because I think that kind of shows that they're into something where they can project themselves into the situation because it is so abstract to them, but being placed in something very real and visceral, like a cemetery, which is very much, here's this person's name, here's what they were to someone, you know, that is making it real in a way that they don't want to project themselves into that situation, because that's real fucking life, and that involves, breaking out of cognitive laziness, as you said. Yeah. So that's a completely different situation, and it blows me away constantly. But yeah.
And I think that's kind of akin to, I had this conversation several times with Christian friends of mine who were directly opposed to Christians watching horror films. And it always struck me as not ironic. What's the C word?
Crappy.
You're doing the thing that you said you shouldn't do. Anyway, basically...
Hypocritical.
Hypocritical. Why did I think it was a C word?
There's a C in the middle.
But essentially that, I think in horror, torture porn aside, horror films have death has a weight to it. It has gravity to it. It's painful to watch. It is difficult to watch. And I think at least, even if you don't go philosophically beyond that in whatever story you're telling, it's still more relevant than the same people who would watch an action film and you just see nameless people mowed down by a hero without a second thought given to the actual...
An American hero.
The actual horror of those people being murdered, whether you think they deserved it or not. There's not a second thought to it. There's no theme of morality or death and what that means. So I think she makes a good point there, and kind of the pointing out the norms of our culture that we necessarily don't think about, just accept because that's how things are. And I think things like cemeteries and horror films and stuff outside of the norm is a good way of challenging those presuppositions that we all hold. I guess we'll jump to the end here because I think we kind of covered everything else I wanted to mention about this article. And so they close off saying, this is exactly what I try to do when I'm visiting a cemetery. Beyond enjoying the peace and quiet, it's a reminder for me to embrace the transience of life and therefore enjoy the present moment more fully. In an age where we're becoming increasingly less familiar with death, when the dying are sequestered away in hospitals and we're told not to talk about morbid things like what kind of funeral we want, thinking about death is more important than ever. It helps us learn and live. Whether you want to enjoy nature, learn more about local history, or find time to reflect on life's big questions, this is a hobby for anyone. This is a hobby that anyone can enjoy, and you don't even need to wear black. For fuck's sake.
But it's encouraged.
One kind of final poke there, yeah. So yeah, everything except that last sentence I think is a good takeaway. I think I heard a psychologist say once that he thinks it's healthy to wake up and think about death every day because it helps us live and love and interact, make meaningful interactions with other people in a way that will leave a lasting impact rather than just kind of pretending that death doesn't exist and it's something that won't happen for far in the future.
I actually had a psychology professor who wore nothing but black every single day, and he loved me because I wore nothing but black every single day.
Album review.
Our album this month is by the band Die Selektion. Their self-description is the first of many enthralling contradictions raised by the young band. Fast beats, cutting bass lines, bleak and subcooled synth layers, and then the most unusual instrument for this genre, the trumpet.
A fucking horn.
The plain brilliancy of how this works out leads to one question only. Why has no one done this before?
And why'd they use a fucking horn?
I'm sure someone has done it before. Die Selektion is a breath of fresh air in the dusty and often narrow-minded world of dark electronic music. That's a whole other topic unto itself. Maybe their youth is the secret to their self-confidence and fearless approach. They overcame their idols easily and presented the best possible emancipation from group giants like DAF, D-A-F, I don't know if you say DAF or D-A-F, Nitzareb, and Die Krups.
I can't even tell if that was shade or not.
Yeah, it was definitely shade.
Yeah, no, you were very convincing. That's a compliment.
We are young and hip, and so fuck you, older people who came before us.
Basically.
Yeah, I don't know. Narrow-minded world of dark electronic music. Listen to the recent episode of We Have a Technical with Seeming, where they interviewed Alex Reed.
Alexander Reed.
I knew that the whole time.
Okay.
And tell me that dark electronic music is narrow-minded and dusty. But we are going to play a track from the album, and that's going to be I'm gonna have to look. This is all in German.
The best
Deine
language.
Stimme ist der Ursprung.
Okay, I don't even speak German, and I can say it better than that.
We're gonna Dir und mir. We're gonna play that song.
Okay.
Mark, take it away.
No, yeah, don't even ask me to try to pronounce the name of this album. It's just not gonna happen.
Go ahead, I did it.
Yeah, and you sucked at it, so.
So you go ahead. And
I'm not even gonna try.
Oh, you're just gonna leave me out there.
Deine,
like
Stimme,
an
Ursprung, Jeglicher, Gewalt. That's at least somewhat accurate.
American son of a
turned me on.
I've had a few comments on Facebook from German listeners who say one of their favorite things is when we do German albums
their language.
we say it terribly.
Okay.
They're laughing at us, not with us.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Super clear.
So. Okay.
Schotten, number 1.
Schotten, not Schotten.
Shot in my face.
Schotten. I like the arpeggiated synth at the beginning. The lyrics were kind of repetitive, but that's not really that big of a deal.
I mean, it is industrial after all.
Yeah, I thought this kind of reminded me of like SITD maybe. The horns are interesting addition. I think those are kind of hit or miss. That'll be kind of a theme in this review. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
That's just more shade. I feel like my only role in this album review is the shade translator. When he says interesting choice of the horns, what he means is tacky as fuck.
Well, only sometimes. Other times they actually worked. So
True. I didn't hate it.
Yeah, I'm not hating.
Track 2 decently done. Mm-hmm.
Track 2 is more of a Nitzer Ebbish track, I think, at least vocally, because that shouted vocal style is very reminiscent of Nitzer Ebb, and I thought it was cool. It brought a lot of energy to the track, which is great. Track 3, Dear and Mir, which we just played. Interesting in that it has the use of electric guitar, but it kind of sits low in the mix, so it's not really overpowering. Doesn't turn it into synth rock or anything like that. Again, with the horns, I'm not sure if it really fits. Track 4, which is Kalter Atem. This is more of a driving track. It kind of has a strong kick, kind of boom, 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 kind of feels like the track is building as it progresses, which is really cool. It, builds up that energy, which I like. Track 5, which I'm not going to pronounce. This one was more scaled back, kind of the opposite of track 4. Vocals really take center stage. Again, I did not like the horns. I thought they were too aggressive for a slower track like this. Track 6, this might have been my favorite on the album, Der Himmel explodiert. The arpeggiated synths kind of reminded me of old school Skinny Puppy, which I really like. So yeah, this was my favorite track on the album. Track 7, Der Augenblick.
Which was the one that they had the weird backing vocal?
I think that was the one I liked.
Was it your favorite one?
Yeah, he didn't like that one, but
I dug the song. They threw in this backup vocal that just sounded
it was like a strange, like, whoa.
Yeah, it was like a pop song kind of thing going on. I don't know. I wasn't into that, but I like the rest of it.
Yeah, track 7, Der Augenblick. Another dance floor track, kind of like track 4, lots of energy. Track 8.
Go ahead.
Track 8.
Go ahead. What is that one called?
No, never.
Dein Herz.
I'll call it Dein Herz. We'll just leave it at that.
Dying hurts.
Dein Herz.
Tausend Scherben.
Dein Herz wie 1000 Scherben. Okay.
That was hot.
This one, I thought the horns worked because they were more scaled back, kind of used to create an ambience, which I really liked. I put that their use has been kind of hit or miss. This one was a hit. And track 9, which was the last track on the album, this was kind of an interesting sounding ambient noise track, some spoken words, lots of echoes. Overall, I liked the album. I liked the vocals. I thought the vocals stood out really well in the mix. The horns I wasn't really a fan of, except for Dein Herz. Overall, I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5 because, you know, even though I wasn't a fan of the horns, it was still... There were a lot of tracks that were good for a dance floor, for an industrial or goth night or whatever. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it despite the horns. So, 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say. I think I enjoyed the horns more than you. I thought it gave it... I thought it gave it a unique flavor, and it kind of harkened back to the experimentation that like Einstünde Neobauten was doing, and some of those earlier bands that were mentioned as well. I thought overall the album was a pretty good mix of the classic industrial and classic EBM with the more contemporary dark electro. Industrial music, and so I dug it. I thought it was, despite how pretentious their self-description was, I do think they kind of struck a good balance of experimentation. But I also,
the voice of God.
Yeah, I also think it does, when you're trying to do something like that, you are going to fail, and I do think the album failed in a few spots. Most saliently was the backing track on Der Himmel. The last track, Deine Stimme, I wasn't a huge fan of. It was just kind of this, you know, ambient. It was ambient and harsh at the same time, and I wasn't really into it. But I thought the vocals were good. I thought the programming was good. The production was good, as well as the construction of the tracks. And I think to a large degree they succeeded with what they set out to do, which was to incorporate a lot of different elements from different dark electronic kind of underground genres, and I dug it. I thought it was good. I didn't know if you were laughing at me or clearing your
I was
throat.
Actually literally just clearing my throat.
Okay.
But
so yeah, but overall though, I still think I'm going to give it a 3.5 as well. But maybe a 4 just for trying to do something different. A lot of the complaints that we've been hearing recently is that the industrial and post-punk, goth rock, death rock genres, the current bands producing music to a large degree are kind of stagnant and regurgitating old stuff. So I think they should get some credit for trying something new, and I think, like I said, I think they succeeded largely. So yeah, I think it's a good album. I think you should check it out, and especially if you're looking for something a little fresh, a little hot and fresh. It's got a nice 80s vibe to it with the kind of MIDI horns, and it's like a Hot Pocket, but
It explodes in your mouth.
that's just something else.
It's like a Hot Pocket with my dick in it.
Yeah, that's what that is.
So yeah, that's it. Check it out. Did you have anything to say? You kind of listened to it.
I did kind of listen to it. I enjoyed it. I was just being hatey to be mean. I did not hate the horns all that much. I thought it was kind of well done. And I have a thing for the German language, so I'm relatively happy anytime I hear it. But no, I enjoyed it.
Except when I say it.
Except when you say that's
when
not hot
it's
at all.
spoken correctly.
Yeah, there's a
really
guy on Omegle who says German sexier than you guys, but I have shit to talk, but not even about this album before we change topics for music. So
this is the last topic.
The only topic. Fuck. Okay. Well, yeah. If you guys have ceased the shade, this isn't even shade. I just fucking really don't like William Control, and I think his new EP is very. I just want to start calling him Captain Pussy Boy because I'm very irritated. But he's like parading around, calling himself a fucking dom. All of his music and all of his merch is like, look at me and my big dick and how much I fucking dominate women. And I'm, for one, I don't think being a dom is douchey. Okay, like that's wonderful. But I look at him on Instagram and I'm like, you're at Warped Tour strutting around with Conor McGregor, except you're not Conor. And for two, it's just, I listen to the new EP because I keep wanting to like him. My opinion that he's a big douchebag is literally only since his last EP, because I think the filth and the fetish is cool. I like what he's trying to do, but this last EP, what's it called, Revelations, the Red EP, just solidified that I don't think he can actually do it. And all of it is very like, he calls himself like goth and his music goth, but every time I listen to his music, it's like he's taking a pop approach to it. And the themes are super repetitive. His writing leaves a lot to be desired. He sings out of his fucking nose and not in a good way. And it's more EDM that, like, it's not even industrial. It's just kind of like you would hear it at a normal club, not a goth club. And I think he only gets to call himself goth because of his look. And he does dress very sharp, I'll give him that. But I kind of just want to bend him over and grudge peg him because he fucking really irritates me. Like, his last song, Submit, is just... Okay,
I wouldn't even say he particularly looks goth, to be honest.
Not
in
really.
My opinion, but
I would say, honestly, he would fit in somewhere like a rockabilly show. I could see that, and that's cool. But yeah. So that's my displeasure with music lately. I'm super excited about Chelsea Wolfe slowly releasing her new album, who probably doesn't even call herself goth, I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure a lot of goths love her.
She has the look.
She definitely has the look.
It's kind of like, well, to be fair, I haven't listened to much Chelsea Wolfe, but it reminds me a bit of Zola Jesus, who I don't even know if she's around anymore.
They are, but they kind of strayed away. She was definitely a more mainstream direction.
Yeah, her first couple albums were just I'm ejaculating goth into your face, but I'm definitely not goth. So it was that kind of thing. That's very
like visceral description.
It is, yes. Yeah.
You said a phrase earlier though about the other music where what was it, discordant and ambient at the same time, and she immediately came to mind. Is Chelsea Wolfe pulls that off very well. That's the only thing I can consistently say for her stuff that I'm like, I could see that it's not harsh enough to be full on like metal, but she's taking aspects of it, but she's making it melodic somehow. So I don't know. I have a big heart on for Chelsea Wolfe,
and not in a shitty Evanescence way, right?
No. Oh god. Okay. For one, don't make fun of Evanescence. For two, actually, you can still make fun.
I'll make fun of Evanescence all day. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, I like their old stuff. Like the Origin era stuff that most people hate. I actually liked
back when they were saying they're Christians.
Oh.
And then
hey,
after
Anne
the album
came
out,
Christian.
they're like,
I don't think they ever said they were Christian.
No, she did. And then they started getting big, and somebody asked
as soon as their albums peaked sales in Christian music
Never
stores.
Mind.
Okay, we're not Christian anymore.
No, because there was a big thing, because I was part of the Christian community then, and it was like, oh, cool, this is a band with Christians that are making cool music. But then after they got big, there was an interview, and she was like, I'm not a fucking Christian. And then I was like, I can't listen anymore. You said the F word and that you're not a Christian.
You worship the devil.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a second here to thank our Patreon members, as we do every month, because the podcast exists and continues to exist because of these beautiful, beautiful people that contribute to the show every single month. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Honestly, the show, we would not be able to afford the network and this podcast and the time and the bills and everything without your continued support. So at the founders level, we have Luna, Willow, Esmeralda, and Abigail. At the Nocturnal Council level, we have Dolly, Michelle, Ariel, Trey, Nephilim Incorruptus, Devin, Necromancy Clothing, Anthony, Kay, and Natalie newly joining us. And then at the Crow's Call level, we have Paula, Robin, Angela Benedict, Jillian Venters, On the 13th, Dom, Noir, Elizabeth, Marco, David, Brenda, Christian, Shelley, Angel, Quinn, John, Claudia, and Lilith. We have a few other new Patreon members this month. Emma and Rose joined at the Crow's Call level. And Angela, who we featured on the mental illness episode, who came on to talk with us about that specific topic is back on Patreon at the Nocturnal Council level. So thank you all so much for supporting us. If you would like to, if you enjoy the show, you think it's worth your time, you think it's worth supporting, if it entertains you every month, consider supporting us for $1 every month. I think most people can afford that. That will get you access to all the additional content that I've created and continue to create for Patreon members only. And if you pledge at higher levels, you can have your name read on the show. You can get exclusive shirts. You can get Skype conversations, those types of things. So if you would like to check out what kind of rewards you can get, head over to patreon.com/cemetery confessions.
You don't wake up one day and decide that you are goth. It's a mindset. It comes naturally. It's a lifestyle.
Just so you know, goth is about 3 things: clothing, music, and lifestyle.
I don't actually have a problem with the goth stereotype of the droopy music and the lots of eyeliner and all black.
It's not about being depressed, and it's not about being sad or locking yourself in a dark corner and just writing sad poetry until your fingers bleed. A lot of people think that goths are Satan worshippers, or, you know, they sacrifice animals or they drink blood.
The goth culture is finding beauty where other people wouldn't think to look.
What is goth? It started out as an artistic movement about 400 years ago. Gothic art, Gothic architecture, Gothic literature. Where do you think we get the term Gothic novels from?
To me, what goth is a movement where people who like a certain type of music dress in a certain way to express that taste in music, and that's all it is. It's just an aesthetic thing.
So what makes you goth is not to do with any kind of criteria. I don't know why people set out criteria.
There's a very few things that I actually call goth. You see, that is the difference between old school goths and many other people, is that we are very cautious about what we call goth, actually.
A lot of kids become goths because it just looks cool, you know, and that's fine too. But at its core, it really is this this dismissing of the mainstream belief that we're happy all of the time and no one's ever sad, you know.
All right, so baby bats, as they're called, are often seen as the lifeblood of the club culture, and often used as the metric by which the health of goth culture itself is measured. And when they aren't showing up to events, the, quote, goth is dead crowd often make their concerns known. As goth ages 40 years on, concern over the livelihood and influx of new members has been a consistent topic of discussion. Elder goths, millennials, the music industry, the internet, club owners, the economy, postmodern youth culture, all of these have been pointed to as culpable in what some perceive to be the death of goth. Are these claims valid or just kind of extremist and myopic assertions? That's what we're going to talk about this month, and I would like to explore a bunch of these avenues with our 2 guests that are joining us, Lennox and Shelby. Thank you 2 for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess a good place to start would just be to get kind of a feel of when you were introduced to goth, what kind of drew you to the culture, and what your local scene is right now, I guess.
I'm Lennox. I am from a small town in Wisconsin. I'm like north of Milwaukee, about half an hour. And the Milwaukee scene's basically completely dead. The only like goth or alternative club I would deem still around is Club Anything, which like maybe has like 20 people on a good turnout for an event, which is pretty rare. Yeah, so I've traveled to Chicago for the scene, which is kind of brutal and costly, especially for gas. And yeah, the Chicago scene, I don't know how I would describe it. I would describe it as it's pretty good. Like, I see Nocturna being like the holy grail of all goth events, really, where like pretty much everyone tries to make it out to those. There's like Medusa's Dark Wave, which is pretty fun. Haven't been out to that one for a little while. Haven't been to any. I've been trying to go to events, but it's just like it comes down to money.
Okay, hi, I'm Shelby. I am newly 21 years old, and I live in Chicago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's exciting because now I can actually, go to clubs and stuff.
Yeah.
But,
Ultra fun.
Get wasted.
Oh, yeah. I live in Chicago, so local stuff would be Nocturna, Bittersweet, things like that. Pretty much anything with the name DJ Scary Lady Sarah attached to it, I'm immediately interested. So.
And you just moved here as well, didn't you?
I moved in October, so pretty recent.
Right. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's just go ahead and jump right into this here and talk about a few different areas where we kind of hear concern over baby bats. Well, I guess first of all, how do you guys even feel about that word? Is that because some people kind of find it affectionate, some people absolutely hate it and find it condescending, or
I don't really feel offended by it because it's like all of my friends that use the word use it in sort of like a playfully teasing way. So it's like it's never been like an elitist has never really hurled it at me. So it's never been like an offensive thing in my eyes. So
yeah, I've kind of had like the same experience where it's just like I personally have never come across any elitist really, and on top of that, like I've only had the term baby bat associated with me a few times where it's like my friends, they mentioned how they picked me up last year at Club Anything actually, and they were like, found this little baby bat all on her own. Where the heck was she?
Okay, well, so let's talk about this first of all. It's this notion that there's tension in the goth scene because of a generation gap, that you have goths who are in their upper 30s and beyond, and then you have kind of the younger people coming in and everything in between. And some people claim that kind of leads to a tension in people coming into the scene trying to bring their own styles and their own ideas, and people who have been in it since the 80s or 90s kind of pushing back against that. So I guess a good place to start would be, have you had any interactions with older goths, and what have those been like in general? Either online or in person.
I tend to, well, like most of my goth friends, like don't really fit into one particular age group. So, I don't know. I haven't had any really like glaring instances of people being elitist or looking down on me or anything. Aside from maybe one or two people like at Nocturna now and then that'll side-eye me for showing up dressed sort of what they would refer to as new goth, I suppose.
See, I haven't actually seen any of those at Nocturna,
neither.
but I actually haven't. I don't go to Nocturna very often, to be fair. So
I try to make it to pretty much everyone, and like if I show up wearing like new goth witchy kind of stuff, like I'll get a couple of side eyes, but other than that, it doesn't really bother me. Like I've never had anyone question my goth cred. So
yeah.
Have you had many interactions with people who are either like maybe in their 40s or?
Not very many. Typically just when we're like waiting in line for an event or something. And even then, it's just like, as soon as they find out how old I am, they're like, you never got to go to Neo, you never got to do blah, blah, blah. Insert, elder goth kind of thing here.
Yeah, because one of the notions of problems in the goth scene is some kind of generation gap. But I think kind of to what you're saying, it does seem like even in online interactions, there is more of a people of certain age groups kind of hang out together just because that's what they're familiar with and just because that's their peer group. So I know certainly older goths and younger goths interact a lot, but I think that might be less common. But there is that idea that you have goths who grew up in the 80s and have this notion of that being the pinnacle of goth, and then you have goths who grew up in the 90s or in the 2000s, and each age group that has their own thing. has this notion of this is the most important or relevant or seminal cultural milieu for goth culture, and everyone who disagrees is wrong. And I don't know if you've experienced any of that with older goths specifically, but it sounds like not. I don't know about you, Lennox.
I've been very fortunate to not really encounter any of that. So,
have you had positive, or Lennox, have you had any positive experiences with? I know I've talked to some older goths, and it seems like they are just as excited to have younger goths kind of be excited to meet them as they are to see them, out at the club. And it seems kind of like a reciprocal thing, but.
Yeah, I personally have never had a bad experience with someone older. Like, I think all my friends are, like, basically pretty much older 20s, almost 30, and then some of them are in their mid-30s. And, like, they found me in a bar in Milwaukee. And they're, like, more than welcoming.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that showed me Nocturnal last year, and then that was kind of that. And trying to go to as many of those as I can, and met Jean-Luc, who I know spins a feud. He just started, like, a new night in Chicago. It's called, like, Sanctuary.
Yeah.
It's like, haven't made it out to those yet, but
hopefully that pans out. He's super active. He tries to start new things all the time, and sometimes
he's
they don't work
real
out,
busy.
Yeah.
Like, super crazy busy.
So, okay, well, let's talk about something else then. And I kind of just want to go through these. People have these debates online all the time about what's wrong with goth right now, or what's causing low turnout and that kind of thing. And one of those is the frustration of some people that younger goths don't care about the history of goths, that they kind of they think it's mostly irrelevant, other than the fact that that's where the music started, but it's not really something that matters for the scene today. And so I'm interested to know how important learning about or knowing the history or any of the bands or any of that stuff from the late 70s, early 80s is to you, and if it matters at all.
See, it's the kind of thing I exactly love learning about. Like, for example, I have learned basically everything about David Bowie since, like, the late 60s, like, onwards. And it's like, I'm very much so into new wave music too. So, like, within that time frame, that sort of history interests me deeply. It's just a matter of getting around to it too, because I am in school currently. So it's like,
right.
I only have so much time to do things in my free time, and I'm probably going to end up doing things like play video games, like, to relax. But if I see something that pops up on Facebook, like an article or something, I'll usually go through and read it, because that only takes me, like, 10 minutes or so. And it's always just, like, a nice break from things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Or no, yeah, you keep going.
I was just gonna say, does that is that kind of thing, does it inform like how you dress, or how you who you hang out with or talk with, or is it influential for your kind of identity as a goth, or is it just kind of a fun thing to know about?
I think I kind of lean heavily towards the traditional goth sort of aesthetic. Like, I have my one vest I've been working on for quite a while now. I just haven't gotten around to, like, finishing the embroidery on it. And so yeah, I really look up to and forward to doing DIY and doing more traditional goth things, like fishnetting and, like, I shaved my mohawk recently, but that's a whole nother shtick. Other than that, I don't think I have many leanings other than, like, somewhat industrial. And I mean, all my friends have their sort of, like, different aesthetic going on. I know they're, like, a little more club-ish or have more industrial or, like, cyber-ish tendencies, but I mean, it's kind of important at this point that everyone sticks together and not kind of shut down other fashions of goth or other branches of goth. Plus, like, I do find other branches interesting. Like, I try not to shut down other things instantly. I, like, try to explore them. If something's not my thing, it's not my thing, but I'm not gonna say no to it or not hang out the kind of crowd.
Yeah, is there any kind of, like, correlation between a certain age group and a certain like subgroup? Like, are younger goths, are they inclined to maybe go for a cyber look, or
new
is
goth,
there
pastel
new
goth,
goth, or is there really not much actual correlation there?
I feel like kids these days, like people my own age, I see them doing the new goth sort of thing, or they'll go for a kind of big name brand stuff like Demonias and Trip, which is like, it's fine.
Yeah. Killstar.
Yeah.
What else is there? What are those other?
Are the Trip
We're
pants
gonna talk
still
about that
around?
later, but-
Like the big baggy Trip pants? Are those still a thing?
I think you can still buy them. Like, the only pair of Trip pants I bought are the bondage kind. They're like really skinny. And I bought those because I wanted something like nice and baggy men's pants, but also like kind of stylish.
Okay. So, well, sorry to get back on that, Shelby. What are your what's your opinion on, if you care or if you don't care about, or are you excited about learning about the kind of history and discovering those old bands, or is the new stuff and the people you're interacting with now more important?
I place a lot of value in sort of learning about the history of goth because since I'm so new to the scene and everything, I'm still sort of figuring out my own style and figuring out, my own taste of music and everything. And just learning about where everything came from has been a tremendous help. And like seeing where everything started to branch off has been extremely helpful. And it's also like for example, okay, I live in the city, and so I take public transportation, and taking public transportation looking the way I do leads to you getting harassed quite a bit. And so there are days when I come home and I'm like, maybe if I just looked a little less weird, this wouldn't happen to me. But then I look and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a whole rich history behind why I look like this. And there's no reason that I should have to, dull that down.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting kind of side topic there, and how accepting kind of alternative looks are now. We had I did an episode, and I've quoted this a couple times on the show, but we did an episode about elder goths, and one of the women on that show said that she went to, I think it was Jewel, and the checkout cashier had pink hair, and she just kind of mentioned that. What that brought to mind was her saying, I was one of the people who in the 80s was threatened with knives and spit on and kicked and stuff for looking the way that I did, and now that is what led to it being acceptable for someone to work and have dyed hair or that kind of thing. But it does seem like it's still pretty common to get harassed or
especially in smaller towns, like more rural places.
Yeah,
you get harassed.
Oh my god! I live in like I mentioned, I live in a very small town. I have my whole entire life, so I've been there longer than most of the people there, and I've never once really had anyone say like anything rude to me, except for the one time I bought that goth as fuck sweater from Killstar because I thought it was funny, and I found it on clearance on like eBay. And I actually wore it out and about, which I usually never do because it's a bit rude. And I had some old lady, as soon as I walked in, being like, "You shouldn't wear that," or like, "Why are you wearing this?" And I just kept walking, ignored her completely. But it's like I've never had anyone.
At least I didn't wear my, Jesus is a cunt, Cradle of Filth shirt.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's like I've never really had anyone say anything rude to me, or like. I get a lot of looks in general. That's pretty normal. That's been just the past few years in general. I mean, even at school, it's like I get some looks from like the industrial design kids. They're a little bit normal looking. Everyone else, though, is pretty dandy.
Man, I had a moment in high school when, 800 years ago. I'm not that old. But I...
Fuck, you're younger than I am.
Senior year, because I couldn't dress very alternative because I grew up in a conservative family, but I started wearing makeup to school. Well, I'd go to school and then put lipstick and everything on. And I actually, one of my teachers spoke to my counselor and was like, I'm concerned that he's been dressing in this way and he might resort to violence because he's having problems at home or something like that. And I had to have this conversation with my counselor about how I wasn't going to shoot anyone.
God.
It's like you actually have to convince people that you're not going to kill them.
Yeah, but I mean, that was still kind of when Columbine was fresh in everybody's mind too. So before we move on, I want to briefly mention this concept called juvenoia, and then we can go on to the next subject here. But juvenoia, so basically it's an exaggerated fear of the effects of social change on youth. And going back to the kind of importance or non-importance of history thing, I think something that we see is you'll have older Goths talk about how vital the 80s were. Or you can have younger Goths talk about how the 90s were the peak of Goth, or even younger Goths talk about how the early 2000s were formative for the current scene. And oftentimes what's happening is this thing called, the term is reminiscence bump. Basically, those teenage years when you get into goth are all about finding yourself, and they're tacitly linked to an emotional state. And we know that when memories are linked to emotions, they are retained more easily. On top of that, the way that memory works is every time you recall memories, it's not like playing back a video, but you're actually reconstructing the memory. So you're taking an already favorably remembered event that was kind of emotionally charged at the time, and every time that you kind of recall it, you tend to forget more of the negative aspects and look on it more favorably. And what happens is people will extrapolate their personal experiences to the entire culture, which is why often you'll see Goths fight so hard to portray their era of goth as seminal or vital, when in reality it's more of an appeal to personal experience than an objective take on history. Now, that said, obviously that's not meant to imply that no one takes an analytical approach to Goth's history. You have someone like me who was not around in the 80s who does, based on historical accounts, I am a proponent of the importance of the early scene. And of course you have historians and things like that. But what often happens are claims from the past get exaggerated, and reality is kind of twisted to fit a preconceived notion. So you'll see articles online arguing for why the 90s was truly the greatest or most seminal moment for goth, and any of those eras. So I think it's important to kind of take that stuff with a grain of salt, and that when you hear someone talking about how amazing and perfect goth was back in the day, and how everything about goth now is shit, and that the internet has ruined everything, and that this is the kids these days are doing the stuff with their damn Instagrams. Often that's the reminiscence bump and just kind of rose-tinted view of culture that probably didn't exist to the standard that they are expressing it. Well, all right. So I guess kind of on that same train of thought in regards to learning about goth, back in the 80s and 90s, most of the ways people could connect was either through going to clubs or the kind of micro media like zines, flyers, indie comics, the kind of word of mouth thing. But now obviously we have books, academic books that have been written on goth, but we have the internet, we have social media. There are websites dedicated to chronicling goth history and kind of music journalism. There's YouTube, there's forums, chat rooms, and all that stuff. So I'd be interested to know, and I think a lot of people want to know, and this is going to get into the next point here, but what are the main ways that you consume content about goth or learn about goth or interact with people in the scene?
As far as like interaction, like direct conversation, like for example, you approached me on Facebook, and that's how a few other people in the scene have approached me. It's just like they saw me at an event or something, they added me on Facebook, and we just chit chat a little. But overall, for like just like taking in like I guess fashion stuff like that, or like seeing what like people are listening to, it's been Instagram, or like people just like make posts about what they're doing, or like they post their outfits or blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's been...
what specifically, like Facebook, Tumblr, or I guess you said Instagram? Do you have any other sources you look at?
I try to use Tumblr for that sort of thing, but I don't think that many goth people or like goth kids really use
unless you're into
Tumblr that
goth.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that goth. There's so
Tumblr
much
goth.
of it.
That's actually a subgenre now.
I'm pretty sure that's basically new goth at this point, partially.
Yeah.
Which is like fine, because I see lots of those like there's like some sort of website where you look up things and piece an outfit together and post it on a website saying how much money it is or something like that, and like links to everything.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's a thing that people do.
Yeah, it's called it's called Polyvore, I think what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, Polyvore.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know what? I think I've seen some screenshots of that. I just didn't realize what it was. Well, Shelby, why don't you tell me where you kind of interact with that kind of thing, and I've got some follow-up questions. But
well, I tend to keep up with people on Facebook for the most part, but also I am hopelessly addicted to Tumblr and to Instagram as well. Instagram a lot more for sort of the fashion aspect of it. And then I do frequent the goth subreddit, though it's not super lively.
Yeah.
But that's...
Yeah, but there's some interesting conversations that go on there sometimes.
There are. Those are the big ones, I think.
Okay, cool. So then so the next big question with this then, and this is kind of all over YouTube. I don't know how much do either of you watch YouTube videos from goths at all?
I do.
Oh, I watch so much YouTube.
Oh, you do? Okay, cool, perfect. So then with YouTube specifically, but also stuff like Polyvore, stuff like Tumblr, there's this concern from people who have been in the scene for a long time that for goths who are just getting in, and even younger than you guys, but anyone at any age who's just trying to learn about goth, you go online or you go on YouTube and you try a few search words, and what you get are these YouTubers or Tumblr pages that are essentially bereft of any kind of substance, and you have kind of these like lifestyle bloggers or YouTubers that put out reviews
videos
for paid content and advertisers, and it's kind of a compared to the mainstream stuff where it's all about visuals and certain looks, but there's no substance there. So the concern then that people online will talk about is that goths will get into it, or people will try to get into goth, and they'll just see unboxings, makeup tutorials, bath bombs, outfits of the day, that kind of thing.
Look at my apartment, see my decorations.
Yeah, and then they won't have they'll have kind of a watered down view of what goth culture is, and they won't have any interest in anything with more depth or philosophical meaning or personal meaning, and just kind of this aesthetic centric view of goth culture. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts about that are.
Oh man, that's such a complicated question. Because I know you're right, because it's like a lot of things that I personally see. It's like a lot of, like, my recommendation box gets a lot of like slap in the face, here's makeup, here's outfits, here's whatever from the goth scene. Because I try not to follow that sort of thing, because I don't really buy into it, I don't really watch videos anyways. Then my Tumblr recommendations, that's also what comes up, where it's like all these like aesthetic things, which is like fine and dandy. A note of like the people because like there's some YouTubers I watch where it's like they just don't have a scene out where they are, which is like, it's sad, but I also understand that like maybe that is why they're making the content that they are, is because they don't have anything else around them. So to get into a gothy swing, like all they can do is like do the makeup and fashion stuff, which like kind of sucks, but at least they can still kind of be a part of it in a way. They can at least like share a little bit of their gothiness with the world.
So what do you think? I mean, do you think that that when people are trying to get into goth, or even just from your own personal experience, was it because I mean, to show kind of my opinion here a little bit, I think the concern that someone will, and I'm sure this happens, but someone will look up goth stuff, get interested in it, and then just kind of stop with the big YouTubers or the Tumblr pages and say, hey, this is what goth is. It's just about looking a little spooky and nothing else. I think personally that if it's an interest that someone is into, they're going to look at other sources. They're going to try and connect with people and learn more about it. And that the people who are kind of like, goth is just about wearing spooky, witchy black clothes, kind of filter out after a while as just kind of a phase. But I don't, why I'm asking you is because I don't want to discount the notion that perhaps that's just kind of where the culture is moving, and that it is just kind of how it is, how people view goth, how younger people view goth now.
I think that's probably like the look is like obviously the most like stand forward part about the goth subculture is like we obviously like so very different, and I think it's at least a decent, because you mentioned like people who are actually interested and will invest more time and effort into actually learning about it. I feel like at this point it's some positive thing because we're getting more people at least notice it and look at it and be like, oh, this is interesting. This isn't something really like dirt kicked my face for, like, because that was a thing back in the day. It's at least getting it out there and advertising to more people, being like, hey, this is actually kind of a nifty thing at least. It's not some like super weird thing.
Do you think that might promote people getting into just kind of looking kind of dark and saying, oh yeah, I'm goth now, and then that confusing new members or kind of muddling everything in general? Or do you think it's a positive thing?
Yeah, I think it definitely does muddle all things a lot in 4Jigs. Like, personally at school, I see a lot of people who will wear dark lipstick and some black clothes and be like having a witchy or goth day, and it's just like, oh man, it irks me so bad.
Wait, they'll say that?
Oh yeah, like on their Facebook posts with them pictures of themselves, or like on their Instagrams or whatever. Yeah, and it's like you're just like passing by, hear it, or like they'll ask me about like one thing off of my vest and not like any of the really interesting stuff. Like it sucks, but again, there are at least like gets those few people who will be actually interested and invest a little more time to learning more about it. Or it's like if I am meeting someone who's like at least somewhat interested in it, or like is somewhat vaguely spooky, I can like try and strike up a conversation and be like, hey, you should check out this. Like at least I can like somewhat try to educate people, or at least somewhat share a little bit that might get them like enticed, may sink them a little bit deeper into it.
What about you, Shelby? What was your kind of experience with looking up information when you were first trying to figure it out?
I mean, when I was first trying to figure it out, it was like, I guess for me it was really different than people that are just getting into the scene now, because I think now it is extremely aesthetic driven, like even more than it was. But for me it was pretty music based. Like I started dressing and doing my makeup this way and everything because I wanted to look like Susie Sue and everything. So but now it's like, God, going on to Instagram now is such a trip, because if you go into the goth tags, it's like the people that Lennox was describing, like girls who will have like a black tank top on and black lipstick and that's it, and they're like goth vibes. I'm like, not quite. But
So what do you think then about that stuff specifically? Do you think that's more of a just people trying to look edgy but not actually interacting with goth culture and will kind of move on eventually? Or is that where you think the whole scene is moving in general? I know that's a kind of impossible question to answer, but just from your opinion.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like sort of the state of things today is that everyone will try on, 50 million different aesthetics before they settle on one. And I certainly hope that's not the way the scene is going, because, don't get me wrong, I love going out in public and seeing people who look like I do. That's an awesome feeling. But I feel like it does kind of dilute the meaning of being part of a subculture if you've got 100,000 Instagram goth clones running around. It's not to knock them, because that is a legitimate aesthetic and everything, but sort of takes away some of the magic for me.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even want to have a label. That seems to be a trend that I notice, at least where I live. You'll have people wearing black lipstick, but also some flannel shirt. They'll be mixing grunge and goth and punk, and it's becoming a lot more nebulous. People just don't want to be a part of any specific subculture, even though they have kind of an interest in it, but also an interest in other things, so they kind of mix things together. I don't know if that happens here, but it kind of does where I live.
It's really funny because the kid, what you just described, that just reminds me of a lot of artsy queer kids in general. Because to be completely honest, because my goodness, I at art school, especially there's always this girls with short hair, it's dyed weird things or cut weird ways, they're wearing flannels, they're wearing lipstick,
they're wearing chokers and
those stupid chokers with the heart and the leather.
The specific art school look.
It's so art school, it hurts. Well, it's my girlfriend just had orientation at this college in Chicago, and when I saw all the orientation kids walking by, and it's you just pick out all those kinds of kids walking by. There was at least 5 of them. It's so funny.
So here, that brings up an interesting point. I'll jump forward a little bit here. I'm not going to read. I won't. It's late, so I'm not going to go into this whole thing. But there's two schools of thought about subculture right now in academic circles, but also just in general. And the first one is the kind of old school or traditional idea of subculture as something that is a group that has a distinct structured culture with values and ideologies, rituals and material objects that promote meaningful interactions and a common identity. And then there's the opposing view to that, which is the post-subcultural view, which is essentially what you guys are kind of describing. And that's the view of youth culture as kind of a buffet where you smash a bunch of things together. It's constantly changing. The identities for those groupings are transitive. They bleed into each other, and group membership isn't a dominating part of the individual's behavior or how they think or that kind of thing. And it's more of a playful thing, kind of a sensory intensity rather than something deeper than that. And those are kind of the two extreme ends of the discussion. Now, me personally, I still hold to, especially for goth specifically, the kind of neo subculturalist view, sort of viewing subculture as a group marked by an emphasis on a distinct structured homology of culture, whose ideologies, material objects, and rituals are shared through the substantive interaction through a common identity and shared meaning, rather than as raw materials to just be harvested by multi-affiliated ephemeral neo-tribes or post-subculturalist groupings. I also think that the post-subculturalist view tends to kind of strawman the neo-traditional subculture view by ignoring the fact that subcultures historically and now can still have those elements and have a degree of fluidity and have a degree of ambiguity and the ability to change and evolve over time and allow for the incorporation of new ideas and kind of a blending and experimentation without becoming post-subcultural. But for goth specifically, everybody has kind of their own view about whether goth is moving more towards that postmodern buffet style identity, or if it has the kind of ability to continue to be meaningful and continue to have an impact on identities that doesn't just kind of go all over the place. I don't know if you two have any thoughts on where you see that going.
I think I see it as, somewhere in the middle where goth is, it definitely has those key elements, like the history, like simply, like you can't move away from the history. That'll always be there, that's kind of essential to it, and like the founding music and sound of it, like we'll always have that, and like the club culture itself. And it's kind of a good thing that it has some elements that are fluid to it, because it brings new things to the table, it keeps it interesting, helps it evolve a little bit. And that's also why it's kind of good that we have these new kids bringing new things to the table, but who are trying to maintain some of the history at least.
Yeah.
Because if it, like anything else, if it just remained stagnant and similar, it would get very boring very fast, and it would definitely die faster than it debatably has been.
Yeah, and I think the whole, because I agree, I do think that the traditional view of subculture, I think sometimes it gets misrepresented as something that's absolutely static, which I don't think is actually the case. I do think it has some degree of ambiguity and fluidity, and that it can remain meaningful but still change over time. The question or the argument, I think, kind of comes in when people discuss how much change is too much change. How do we retain kind of the where it came from, but allow new members to also have their impact and also kind of drive the culture forward? And I think and that's where kind of going back to the very first thing, the generational gap, I think that's where some people see that tension coming in, because unlike many other subcultures, you do have members that were there from the very beginning that are still participating. So yeah, the question I think really is like how much change is too much change, or how much not changing is too much. So
I don't know how I feel about it in general. Like, I do appreciate the idea that we could be moving towards something where it's like goth is more accessible in general.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do have a very strong emotional attachment to the idea of goth as a community, and I feel like as we move further and further towards, like you were talking about, like buffet style post subculture, it sort of dilutes the sense of community. And so I'm conflicted on it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let me ask you this then, for both of you, what's personally, what do you think for you is the most important aspect of goth culture? And then secondly, do you see goth culture as kind of a multiple different things altogether, or is it just kind of one thing?
I would definitely have to say, for me, it would have to be the music. Because at least the music, because we had that founding history with the music itself, And then we have the music going forward, where we do have at least some, I mean, at least today we have some bands, like some music coming out that does appeal to goth, and that is actually goth, which is good. I kind of wish we would actually see more, like, people my age investing in maybe creating some music. I mean, I have an interest in creating music, but I know nothing about music. And also, like, don't have money for synthesizer, so it's not going to happen for a while. But, shoot, I'm losing my track of thought.
Well, we can talk about music just real quickly. I mean, when it so I had William, Faith, and Sarah on the show, and one of the things they brought up, which has been kind of a recurring question since they were on, they said that for them, and this kind of comes because, you know, William was around in the early 80s death rock scene. So he was saying that a lot of the goth music coming out now to him sounds regurgitated and kind of the same old. And his view is that bands like Chelsea Wolfe or bands that are technically outside of the goth genre are the ones that are really innovating with the music and being appreciated by goths that are doing like the interesting kind of thing. So where's your kind of both of your kind of music tastes at as far as what you listen to that you kind of think is within the sphere of goth music?
I personally listen to a lot of new wave. Like, so my taste goes to the 80s because my mom basically gave me her music taste. So, like, my favorite band is Pet Shop Boys. And with that, it's their sound has changed every single album, and they just released a new album like last year.
How did you like the Prayers version of West End Girls? Did you hear that?
Maybe. I don't really listen to a lot of covers by them.
Says it all.
Okay.
I'll have to look into it later. I think I saw a Guar's cover of something like It's a Sin or something like that. I don't remember what it covered. But
I only mentioned Prayers because they're I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a Cholo Goth is what they've called themselves.
Cholo Goth.
And they did, they have a really interesting music video for West End Girls. But
I'll definitely look into that later. I always like getting it's kind of interesting because I never met anyone that ever heard of Pet Shop Boys, and then as soon as I entered goth, they're like, "Oh, of course we've heard of them."
Of course, yeah.
And I'm just like, "What?" It's insane. But I have a very hard time finding music I actually like these days, and there's only like 3 bands I can name that I always name when I tell people I don't like new music, but there's 3 bands I really like, which is really like Metric. I think their music is pretty cool. Not like super crazy huge fan, but like I just in general I really appreciate
like
them.
Kind of like a dance synth pop type band, aren't they? Or
yeah, they're kind of weird. That's why I like them. They're a little bit different. Then my second one is LaRue. I think she's a UK artist. She's like
LaRue?
Yeah, LaRue. It's like LA space ROUX.
Okay, that's something different than what I was thinking.
Super androgynous person, super weird and queer. Like, does a lot of like new wave 80s kind of fashion shoots. But like, her music is pretty interesting.
There was in the late 90s, there was an artist, LaRue, but with no space, that was a Christian pop musician. So I was surprised to hear.
I still like.
I was like, wow, a throwback. All right, well, that's weird. And what was the third one?
The third one is just like another queer artist. Her name's LP, just letters LP. And her music is like it's been pretty poppy. I don't know. It's just like more so than anything else. Her voice is just really interesting to me, and that's like what really attracted me to her. But yeah,
I don't know any of those. I'll have some new music to look up then.
I've heard of the first 2, but I haven't heard of LP.
LP is like super crazy popular in Italy.
Just the letters LP?
Yeah.
Boy, that'll be easy to Google.
It's really funny too.
Those are the best. Those are people kind of get off on the most obscure or hardest to Google. Like there's a band from the 80s called how is it, like Gothic Girls or Sexy Gothic Girls or something?
Oh, Christ.
And they're like, yeah, good luck Googling that one. I'm like, okay.
That's so damn funny.
We were listening to what, the Lucy Show earlier?
Yeah.
A band called the Lucy Show.
Yeah. What about you, Shelby? What kind of music are you into these days?
That is a very big question. So my taste tends to lean more metal. I listen to quite a bit of like Old.
Which type of metal?
I listen to quite a bit of death metal, quite a bit of thrash.
Okay.
I have been listening to a ton of industrial lately for some reason, like industrial and like synth pop, sort of. It's been like, I guess, like 3 most listened to artists lately would be Pig, KMFDM, and William Control. So it's a weird mix, but
don't listen to the first part of this episode.
Don't listen to the first half of this podcast.
My first guest talked shit about William Control. But,
I'm not surprised.
what do you like? What is it? I mean, people can like whatever they like. What is it about William Control that you like? Just enjoy the music.
I really like his voice, and I like stuff that's dancey, I guess. So that's
okay. Cool.
Kind of way I gravitate towards his stuff.
Now, let me ask you this: when it comes to metal, because some people, going back to kind of the other thing I was talking about, people get into arguments over saying certain metal bands are goth or should be considered goth. Do you kind of hold those two genres, goth music and metal, as just interests that you have, or do you try and put them together?
That's a good question. I tend to hold them as like adjacent to each other, but I don't really try to like categorize any of my metal interests under my goth interests. So
okay. So I got a couple more things to talk about here. I think one and this kind of varies from person to person depending on, sometimes there's nothing to talk about in general, but one of the topics that tends to get a lot of attention around people that are younger that are getting into goth is how to negotiate those spaces while living with parents, or how to handle that kind of thing. So I'd be interested to hear what each of your experiences was with figuring that out, and when you were living with your parents. Like, did you have to come out? Did you have to fight to express yourself? Did you have to hide it completely? Were they more accepting? How did that go? If you're comfortable talking about it, of course.
Yeah, the trick to it with me was, like, I kind of gradually did things, because, like, the bigger thing that I worried about growing up was coming out as gay. That was the bigger issue.
Right. Okay,
so you say coming out as goth, it, like, makes me giggle a little. 'Cause I'm like, that's like nothing. Well, it's like in my household, so my parents are 23 years apart. My mom is like 49 right now. My dad's like 72.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a huge age gap and a lot of different experiences. Very different growing up for like each of them. And so my dad is like super conservative, voted for Trump, blah, 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 that kind of person. And for some reason, he's pretty accepting about things. He's just very, like, both my parents are very concerned about my safety in general. They don't want me getting beat up or, like, made fun of or, like, just anything happening to me. They want me to be safe at clubs, blah, blah, blah. They're very happy I have older friends look out for me. Overall, like, they don't like that I'm got facial piercings and tattoos. My dad was like, I'm gonna burn your tattoos off, which was a very exciting thing to come home to when I got my wrist tattoos done.
It would probably look a lot worse if he tried to burn them.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But my mom, overall, she thinks my aesthetic is very cool. She's like, oh, he looks so 80s. It's so great. Like, she like totally digs it. And like, she tells some of her friends about it. She's like, look at my daughter. Look how odd she is. Doesn't she look like she came out of the 80s? And they like love it when I get weird sunglasses and stuff like that. They also was very concerned about the cost of it, because like after I got a brand new pair of New Rocks for like $300, and they were like, are you kidding me? They're like, please don't do this ever again. Well, it's like
you can just tell them they last a long time.
They do, and that's why I bought them. I was like, Mom, it's either I get like crappy pneumonias that break after 6 months.
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, or it's like the quality shoes. Well, I mean, to be fair, I also bought a pair of all black moon boots that have like a nice fur cuff.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, my mom was not happy about those. But yeah, overall it's like
moon boots like a la Napoleon Dynamite moon boots. Is that what we're talking about?
I'll have to show you them. They're like, oh my god. I'll find them on Amazon and send you the link.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I got like this. What inspired me is actually a goth YouTuber, the Gothic Alice. She like did a shoe show thing, and she had a pair of moon boots that had like this glitter like text on it, and hey, had the fur cuff, and they were all black. I was like, oh my god, those are just so wicked. I have to have some. So when I got the money, that's the first thing I bought was some moon boots. Oh, it was ridiculous. But yeah, overall, my parents are extremely, they're just like concerned for my well-being. It's kind of been an uphill battle where it's like, well, I look the way I want because I also, like, I have gotten a job, although I did leave it, and like, I do get good grades in school, and I go to a very nice art school, and I'm very successful. I've gotten an internship at one point. Like, if I wasn't as successful as I am, they'd be like, no, you can't look this way. You have to, like, you have to conform. You have to, like, blah, 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 whatever. But since I do try to be a decent kid, and I do get decent grades, and I try to make them proud, like, they're pretty okay with it. So
it's sort of, I had kind of a weird experience with it growing up, because I grew up in a house with my mom and my mom's husband, and my mom's husband has this bizarre hatred of anything, like, alternative about me. Like, he wanted nothing more than for me to just be, like, a normal person who doesn't dress goth.
Yeah.
And so that always resulted in fights between the two of us, because, like, apparently I was wearing too much eyeliner and I was wearing too much black, and that was always sort of a point of contention. And my mom was always okay with it, but
was it just because it was different than the norm, or were there concerns about you worshiping Satan or doing drugs or something like that?
It was just because it was different. And he would try to hide it under the guise of, he's like, oh, well, I don't want you to be bullied. But the thing is, like, I was like a fat, nerdy kid in this little Midwestern town. I was going to be bullied anyway. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it was tough growing up because he was just absolutely not there for it at all. Anything remotely alternative that I was into. My mom was always pretty supportive, though. And she still is. And our relationship has gotten better as I've, become an adult and moved out of the house and everything. But it's like she tries to place a limit on what I do, I think I would say. Like, I'll show up for lunch with her or something, and I'll be in, like, corporate goth and, like, have my hair tied back and, like, no facial piercings or anything. And she's fine with that. She thinks that's nice and everything. But if I want to, say, like, put my mohawk all the way up and pop in, like, a septum ring and dress in tatters and everything, she's a little more hesitant about it. And the rest of my family is very much of the opinion that I should not look this way. Like, if I...
Do you still live with them?
No, I don't. I live on my own.
Okay.
But if I come home and I, complain about an instance where I got harassed on the CTA or whatever, they're like, well, if you would just not look like that.
Right.
And it's like, you're missing the whole goddamn point of it.
Oh my god, my parents tell me that all the time. Also, I do still live at home because I go to a really stupidly expensive school, and I choose not to have a job during the school year, so can't live on my own.
Probably a good choice.
Yeah, it's like I did it for a semester, and that's why I quit. I was like, nope, I can't even handle working on weekends. This is insane.
Oh, I totally feel that.
Was that one of the? Was that Shelby? Did that motivate you to move out because of that? Was that one of the reasons?
There were a lot of things that motivated me to move out. A lot of it is like I desperately wanted out of my hometown to begin with, because I'm not actually from anywhere around Chicago. I'm from a little teeny tiny suburb outside of St. Louis, and it's very tough growing up in this town looking the way that I do. And so I wanted, because this is very much like, if you grow up here, you're not supposed to grow up and be goth. You're supposed to grow up and wear camo and yoga pants everywhere, and keep your kids in the same school district that you went to, and like it's very small-minded small town. So it's like I needed out of here badly.
I think that's true of like every small town pretty much.
We somehow managed to hit like all the small town stereotypes. So I was like, I need out. And Chicago was the nearest big city.
So okay, cool. Well, I want to close out with just a short discussion about clubs in general and kind of your perspectives on it, because a lot of the times when we get into conversations about like I mentioned, the health of the goth scene, the club scene is usually conflated with that there's a direct correlation between the health of the goth scene and the health of the club scene. So I guess a good place to start would just be to ask, from your perspective, getting into moving to Chicago, kind of getting involved in the scene, having a fresh perspective where you haven't been in it for the last 15 years, and seeing how things have gone up and down. What's your kind of feel for the health of the scene, events and clubs and that kind of thing?
I feel like the scene, or at least in Chicago, is pretty healthy, like given the turnout that I see when I go out to clubs and everything, and see how like genuinely passionate everyone is about being there, which I think that's like the biggest part for me, is like the passion that everyone puts into it. That sort of signals to me that the scene is alive and well.
Yeah, I would say the turnout is pretty nice, and like honestly the community's pretty good. I know there's like, like kind of like small bit of drama between certain like groups within goth, which is like fine and normal. That's just life in general.
Yeah.
But it's like I kind of wish there was more turnout to smaller events like Darkwave and such, because like Darkwave it can be fun. It's always like a pretty like, yeah, this is pretty alright, the music's good. It's like nice to chit chat and catch up with people, but it's
sometimes the music's good.
Yeah, it's just like
in my opinion.
It's just like the problem in my opinion is like there's not enough people on the floor dancing, because it's like I'm not gonna dance if like no one else is. Like I'm just one of those kinds of people.
That's where the alcohol comes in. Boost confidence.
I'm poor though, so that's why it's like why.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, so there's some ideas. So from the people who say that the goth club scene is kind of dying, one of the ideas or concepts that have been offered is that instead of going to a goth club, younger goths are more inclined to go to either like non-club events, house parties, meet up at like a Starbucks, go to cemeteries, go to anime conventions, comic cons, have like movie nights, that kind of thing. Do you feel like for you or for other people that you know that are younger, that goths are more of a antiquated notion or kind of a special occasion, and that perhaps you feel like those other events are either safer spaces or more comfortable or more appealing?
I feel like a lot of it has to do with like the accessibility of those spaces for people that are under 21 in particular. Because like I think what really, if anything, is, quote unquote killing the club scene, those damn millennials. No, if anything is quote unquote killing the club scene, it's the fact that like I think younger goths now don't start out, their journey in the subculture going to clubs because they can't get in. So they resort to other avenues like cons. Like I see so many little fetus goths at conventions. I'm a con guest fairly often, and that's where I see packs of them, fetus goths. I didn't know what else to call them. But yeah, I feel like they seek out other avenues to begin with, and then they just happen to stick with it.
Okay. Interesting. You think they stick with it as, you think that's okay? So you think like the 21 and up or the 18 and up thing is the problem, and that because there are other options, that once people get to turn 18 or turn 21, they're less interested in going to clubs because they're already familiar with these other places.
Yeah, I feel like it's just people are creatures of habit, and they tend to stick with what they're most familiar with.
So what are some other reasons you think maybe people aren't going to clubs? Is it, I think, money, the economy? Because like you mentioned, the millennial thing. there's this some specific people have decided to say that millennials are killing the goth club scene.
Apparently we're killing everything. So
just like everything. Yeah, everything. Yeah. So I mean, do you think there's any validity to that, or is it, you know, problems with the economy? Are there do you think it's harder? It's because when you go to a club, it's harder to actually have a conversation with someone, or there's easier access to music online that you're actually interested in, or there's other options for community or that kind of thing?
I feel like it's a combination of all those things. Like, I do definitely feel like a big part of it is just the economy, because it's like, I know I'm broke as fuck. All of my goth friends are broke as fuck. So that, and then sort of ease of access of music, I would say, were like the big two when it comes to it.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to say, like, money is such a contributing factor, because it's like, I don't even know if I can take the train to go visit a friend for their birthday next week, and I'm like trying to think like, oh god, I need $10 for Nocturna. What if I want to drink? Like, I want my big fuzzy vest that can shove things in. Like, I have this, oh my god, I have this marvelous big vest I could totally stash stuff in, but I don't. Probably should. But yeah, it's like, it's definitely a matter of like thinking about where that money could go towards too, because it's like, well, I could spend money on going to clubs and drinking, or I could spend more money in my wardrobe or into my DIY. So it's like kind of a trade-off, because I can hang out with my goth friends outside of the club, and like honestly, like they're so busy touring conventions and like selling the merchandise, it's like they're very tired, or like all they want to do is hang out at the pool on the weekend and just like chill. And I'm like, you know what, that's completely fair, and it's free, and they always have alcohol. It's a great time. Because it's like at clubs, it's not always a guaranteed good time unless it's pretty much Nocturna, and even then it's like, I have been to a bad Nocturna, and that was probably Halloween, when there was all the normal people showing up and then being like, oh shit, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Because that was such a busy night, and like the drinks weren't that, like the mixed drinks weren't that good. I used to stick to canned cider and stuff like that. So it's like,
that was actually my first Nocturna. I had fun. I had a great fucking time.
Yeah, it's like I had a pretty okay time, because I went there with like someone I was seeing at the time, and I was like, the dancing was okay, but it was like the floor was jam packed though, and that was the part I didn't like, and it was like hard to see where everyone was, and like couldn't really talk to my friends. It was so freaking loud. Like
I agree, and I think some people misplace, or some people see these other perhaps if there is a diminishing amount of people that are going to goth clubs, they see that as a lack of passion for the community. But I think what you two are describing is that the passion is there, it's just being manifested in different ways, and that the kind of community experience is still happening in meaningful ways. It's just moved to different places where, so like for example, I have a friend, a good friend of mine. She lives in a very small city in the UK, and there's not much of a scene there, but she makes her own events. She does stuff. She has house parties. She tries to organize like picnics and things like that. I'm having I host the one thing I do is a yearly like goth thing at the Renaissance Fair. These kind of alternative places that are more casual, and you can interact with people in a better environment and still have fun and still have that community. It's just not necessarily at a club, you know, where you're screaming at each other and you can't afford alcohol, and you know there's a bunch of yuppies off the street trying to grab your ass or whatever.
Yeah, it's actually like another small part of like why I don't go out that much in Chicago, because like me and my girlfriend were thinking about going to the club last week for like Sanctuary, and it's like we chose not to go because it's like, well, we'd have to take the train, it would be late, we don't want to Uber because that's going to cost double as the train, and like how are we going to pay for alcohol there? It was just like safety is just like good ideas. Like if we're taking the train at 2 a.m, there's gonna be someone creepy on that goddamn train. We already saw
train is the worst part.
We already saw like some girl move like yesterday out of her seat because like she was like, oh my god, there's like such a creepy guy over there in the corner. I was sitting next to him, and we were like, oh god, like this is a daily thing. It was just like on the commute train too, like
yeah. And that's why we carry knives. Yeah. That said, I mean, I still think, personally, I still think that clubs and concert events and those types of things are still important for the scene and for the community and should still exist. People should still go to them and support musicians and have these places to kind of safe places to experience music and to dance and to get together and stuff like that. But I do agree that, that's not the only way that we can come together as a community and have, good experiences together. So, but it is a good way to meet people. It's just not we have the internet now, so we can organize with a larger group of people outside of the one place where we can go to meet people. So. Mark, anything you wanna any kind of questions about anything?
Well, I mean, I do agree it's good to be able to do these kind of non-club events. The trick is to make sure that it's inclusive enough, and you can make a presence of it enough that everybody knows about it in the scene. And Facebook is definitely a good tool for that. But usually, like, I try to think of it from the perspective of somebody who's maybe not a local, or maybe just moved to that area. Like, where would they go looking for events, specifically non-club events? So I think that's kind of the trick, is getting that presence out there. So,
and I think just one last bitch about the millennial thing. I think with goth specifically, because like we were talking about before, we have a large range of age groups that millennials are not the only people that could be going to the scene. I know there are a lot of, in Chicago specifically, a lot of people that are older than millennials that just don't go out anymore. Maybe go out to a concert every once in a while, but don't go to club events and stuff. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. But shit, I was gonna say something else. I forgot. What were you saying?
I can't remember.
God damn it. It was good too. It was not about my butt plug. I have friends over at my house, and apparently I left one of my butt plugs in the bathroom on the sink, and they were pleasantly surprised. I don't know. Yeah.
Very pleasant.
Oh fuck! I totally lost my train of thought. Millennials, money.
They're killing everything.
It must be pretty.
Man, it was good
powerful
too.
If we can kill everything. Like, damn.
Right?
I kind of like it. Right? It's kind of like, oh, we're destroying Applebee's. Okay, cool. Applebee's sucks. Like,
yeah,
fuck guys.
Applebee's for sure.
What did you decide to take down this week? Come on.
Yeah, like it kind of feels good. Like, for a group of people that don't have any money, we sure.
I just hope Cracker Barrel is next.
Cracker Barrel. Well, hey, thanks both of you for coming on and hanging out through the technical difficulties that I was having, and spending some time with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it was super fun. Totally do it again.
Are there any do you guys have any like shops or music projects or anything that you want to promote at all? I don't think, not that I know of, but
how many music? I mean, if people want to find me, my Tumblr, wow, Instagram is Lennoxide. It's like LENNOXIDE. I don't know, because like I've found cool. It's really interesting. I actually get a lot of like pretty cool and like significant goth people following me back on my Instagram, which is nice. Yeah, so
I'm gonna plug my friend's band really quick, because I sometimes do merch for this like local industrial band. They're called V is for Villains. They're pretty cool. Should check them out.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of.
How do you they're classified as industrial? For some reason I heard people saying they were steampunk.
They get classified under steampunk because of the way they look, because they dress like a bunch of masked supervillains.
Right, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but the music is very much like very heavily like industrial influenced, like industrial and noir. And actually the most recent album has Anesh on it. So getting real industrial for a minute.
Wow.
It's really good. It just came out a couple weeks ago. Highly recommend it. It's called Murder in the Art. So that's really all I have to plug. So
cool.
I'm gonna say actually I want to plug my friends really quick. Dark Star Fusion. My friends own that and sell lots of good cyber goth goodies.
Oh yeah, Dark Star. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just modeling from the other week, which is super fun. But yeah, their merchandise is always really good.
And I'm gonna go plug my butt.
I knew you were gonna make that comment.
I was waiting. Well, thanks again for coming on. It was a pleasure to hang out with you. Something I wanted to mention quickly before the end of the show that I forgot to is in regards to the idea of the club scene dying, of the goth club scene dying. Now, unfortunately, there are no numbers specific to goth clubs or alternative clubs or any kind of specific subcultural club, but there are numbers, metrics, and statistics on nightlife and clubs and bars in general. And I wanted to cover a couple of these here to kind of have you reconsider your confidence level in the notion that the club scene is dying. So first of all, we have from the American Nightlife Association, and I'll put links to these in the show notes as well. And just to, feel free to do your own research. I didn't spend a ton of time looking all of these up, but feel free to kind of dig into it and see what you can find as well. They say, according to Technomics Bar Tab, the 2013 top 100 nightclub and bar venues generated $1.5 billion in revenue. More than 2/3, 68% of operators surveyed experienced revenue growth in 2012, and nearly 2/3 of them reported revenue growth in excess of 10%. Distilled Spirits Council reported that suppliers' sales went up 4% in 2014, and total U.S. volume growth increased 2.2%. It is estimated that overall retail sales of distilled spirits in the U.S. market is nearly $70 billion, supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs in the hospitality industry and producing over $20 billion in tax revenues. So here's another site, Statista. They say sales of the drinking place sector in the United States have steadily grown since the mid-1990s, reaching $23.15 billion US in 2015. The sector includes bars, pubs, lounges, taverns, and nightclubs. According to Ibis World, the annual growth from 2012 to 2017 has been 1%, so steady growth. And according to Anything Research, nightclub profits have steadily risen from 2011 to 2016. This in contrast, of course, to the if you did an internet search for millennial nightclub, and you'll see kind of a bunch of scary headlines about how millennials are killing the nightlife scene. But if you actually look at those articles and look at the statistics being cited or not cited and kind of view them in context of where they're pulling their data from, usually that you'll see the headlines are generally clickbait, or they're citing a online survey with terrible methodology that really has no relation to reality, or they're talking about businesses that are closing down, which is something that has always happened from venues that have poor business models, or they're in shifting areas, or city regulations, poor financial planning, that kind of thing that already happens. and attributing it to millennials. That's not to say, again, that this has any bearing necessarily on goth clubs, because we don't have those numbers. My contention generally is that what we see is generally rise and fall. The tide comes in, the tide comes out from the early 90s, 80s as well, but 90s to now. You see kind of an ebb and flow in popularity of goth, and the influx of new members and opening of new venues, and the closing of venues and the opening of venues. And even now, I could tell you events and venues that have opened recently, and those that have closed, and even in micromedia and everything. I think it's just generally kind of a ebb and flow, as it were, and the problem with that, or really what happens with that, and what happens with the lack of actual quantitative data, is you can take it and use it to support your agenda, or your presupposition rather, in either direction. So I think the truth of the matter is somewhere in the middle. Of course, it's good to stay vigilant. It's good to support your local scene. It's good to build community. It's good to encourage people to get out and to point to local scenes that may be suffering, to motivate people to go out. But I think the alarmist view, or the utopian view, is a bit overblown.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister Suggestions.
All right. Well, if you are into TV as a medium for storytelling and for entertainment, as I'm sure most of you are, you're probably aware of stuff happening right now, like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or Twin Peaks, or any of these other really quality TV shows on right now. And I'm going to try and dig for something a little more obscure, something I was pleasantly surprised by, although it might not be too obscure considering the audience for the podcast. But what I'm suggesting this month is Castlevania, the Netflix exclusive show. Now, I was pretty excited when they announced this. Generally, I don't keep track of promotion of shows before they are released, because I don't like to wait. So, and a lot of times these kinds of things just fall through. The Crow remake is a good example, but a lot of the kind of gothy things end up either in development hell, whether it's a video game or a movie or a TV show. So I just like to be pleasantly surprised by hearing, hey, that thing that you heard about a year ago is out. I was also surprised when I actually looked on the Netflix listing to see that the show is only 4 episodes long, and they're 25 minutes each. So it's essentially you can watch it in one go as kind of a feature film length movie. This is an animated TV show, so even if you're not into that, though, I would suggest checking it out. And I think the kind of ease of entry with the length of the show is lends itself to that. Although I do think it detracts in a couple ways, or in a couple different episodes, that being the first episode and the last episode. I felt like the short runtime and the how concise the episodes were detracted a bit from the storytelling. There were a few moments where I don't think it was given enough, the story was given enough room to breathe. Generally, I'm a proponent of shortening stories because it cuts out a lot of the excess that can make a good show a lesser good show. But I think this could have done, that's my one complaint really, I think this could have done for a bit, maybe one more episode or maybe slightly longer episodes to give it some room to breathe. That said, the animation quality is wonderful. There's I thought someone was breaking into my house, but it's just my cat. There's a good amount of gore, and the storytelling is generally well done. I was pleasantly surprised personally at the explicit critique and conversation around religion. I won't really spoil the themes, but that was something I wasn't really expecting. I was kind of going in for a Dracula story, a story of power, a story of, if you've played the Castlevania games, you might have some expectation of what would be going on, trying to take down this evil vampire who's causing all kinds of havoc. And speaking of the video game, the show is self-contained. So if you don't know anything about the video game or even knew that it was a video game, it doesn't matter. Now, do you get more out of it? I think so, but I think the story it's more based on is Castlevania 3, which is one I haven't played. So it didn't really help me there. But, it's kind of in the tradition of those, couple handfuls of games you can point to as something a goth would enjoy for the gothic aesthetic, for the dark themes and the monsters and that kind of thing. So all in all, the show is great. I think it works from an entertainment perspective. It works on a deeper level if you want to consider some of the themes that are brought up, some of the topics discussed. It works from a artistic view. I think it's a beautiful kind of visceral art style. The monsters, the fight scenes, the kind of some of the horror and the tension really plays well with the art style they've chosen. Some of the voice acting was a little bit off in my opinion, but I think it worked overall. And I think the characters are pretty well developed, aside from my small complaint about how I think it would have benefited from an extra episode. So if you're looking for something to watch that is in kind of the gothic arena, check that out. Do not watch Dracula Untold. I know it was panned, and that was something I also thought maybe I'll give it a shot since I never watched it, since it did get such poor critical reviews. And yeah, that's a steaming pile of garbage aside from one or two bright spots in that movie. So check that out. Other things you can check out. Lennox, our guest on this episode, took the time to write out some responses to the questions discussed and some other questions that did not end up getting discussed on this episode around baby bats. So if you're looking for some further reading, if you're looking to do some research, I know some academics listen to the show, you can check that out on the show notes, which are in your app or on the website, thebelfry.rip. I also just recorded and published part one of a critical review of the book Goths Dark Empire, and that is on the Patreon page. So if you want to get access to that and some of the other videos that I've put on there, You can check that out, patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions, and for just $1 a month, you can get access to that stuff. Our guest next month is going to be heartthrob Victor Morgor. You may know him from YouTube, where he showcases his sultry, dulcet tones and his beautifully bald head. He's going to be on, and we're going to be talking about fetish and BDSM and kink and where that kind of crosses over into the goth realm and where those two things are distinct from each other. So thank you for listening. Again, if you would like to support the show, you can do that over at patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions, or just tell a friend and let them know to check us out. We will be back next month as always. So until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of the Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.
What episode was that? I can't even remember.
Gothic Sex was episode 25? 26? Somewhere around there. I don't remember.
So a long ass time ago.
It was a while ago. This is episode 47, 46.
We're approaching 50.
I don't know.
If you count the
we're about to hit 43,000 likes on Facebook. And all of those are for the memes that I post, not for the podcast.
Well, I think if you posted more butt pictures, you'd probably get a lot more likes, just in my opinion.
I think so.
Yes. Yeah.
I just shaved it the other day.
Oh, well,
I was thinking when you were talking, you said something about punk clothes.
Yes.
One of the new hires at work mentioned that she was like, she was trying to be relatable, but it sounded kind of condescending. Like, I used to dress punk when I was in high school, and I had like butt flaps and stuff. And whatever, and I was like, okay, well, if you have any stuff laying around, just give it to me.
I have butt flaps too, but it's a skin condition.
There's something wrong with his taint.
Jesus Christ, I don't even want to think about that.
Yes, you did.
With that beautiful picture, we're going to jump into the news.
Throwing shade again. Okay. Well, I don't know if we can edit the noise out because we're all on one track here.
Just try not to cream yourself while looking at me. Okay.
He's trying very hard. I can tell. The sexual tension is just
this
insane.
Alcohol is not helping me.
No, I think it is helping you, actually.
It's helping me in all the wrong ways.
Side note, when we got here, Daniel was waiting outside, arms outstretched in a kimono only, except for socks, which was, I think a new fetish that people should just add to their list of fetishes on FetLife. Like, that's like in itself.
I forgot about FetLife. The first place I heard about that was a Dark Souls podcast, and they do the show, and then they started talking about how they record. And the way they introduced it was to say, to give you a peek beneath the kimono or something like that. And I thought, I kind of like that imagery. I'm going to use it for something.
I was more than happy to peek beneath his kimono.
So
I'm curious. Okay, so when you were Christian, this is super tangent. Did you have like a repressed like thing for taboo like blasphemy shit, or were you full on?
Not at all.
I did.
Really? Okay, so so you were also raised Christian?
I was very, very conservatively, and I'll admit now I had a fascination for like gore and fucking pornography and just
Well, everyone has a fascination for pornography.
Well,
that's just called.
See,
it's not a fascination.
I think it was called being human.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I had an experience where when I was a Christian, I was trying to look up goth porn stars, and I don't remember what her name was, but she had a one of her videos was she was in a nun costume and she was using a crucifix as a dildo.
Yeah.
And it was
offensive.
Was it Liz Vicious?
Yeah, for at the time. Yeah. And I was like,
that was purely
it totally scarred me. It was totally blasphemous and offensive, and I didn't like it at all. So I was full on Jesus, come inside me, and not in a weird way. So
wait, I didn't mean it that way.
Wow,
this I don't. I'm going to offend so many people. By the way, Mark, I just got this email from 1,000 Hours asking us to review their album.
You're going to have to start paying me to review all these albums.
He'll pay you in dick. I'm pretty sure.
That'll be okay.
Yeah.
I really like that.
So I don't have to pay you for this one.
You might not have to pay me for that one. I might actually review that one of my own accord.
Bandcamp.
I'm still mad that the only band that sent me music to review that I genuinely loved was in fucking Florida, of all places.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck Florida.
Yeah, of course, Mark, they have a similar artists. The first one is Lycia.
And the second one is This Mortal Coil, which I love, and the Cocteau Twins, which I love, and The Cure, which I love.
Yeah.
Which I'm wearing their shirt for now.
Listen, Mark, we have work to do.
I'm sorry, it's very hot in here, and I've been drinking.
We're done. So